We continue now at the top of Daf Tesam at Aleph and Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 9a. The Gemara is in the middle of bringing a Mishnah from Meseches Peya to show that Rabbi Shimon holds Palgin and Dibura. The Tanakam in the Mishnah says that if a person writes over all of his property to his Eved, so his Eved goes free. But if the person is Shayir Karka Kolshu, if he leaves out any property, so the Eved does not go free, because it could very well be that the Eved was the property that's being left out. And Rabbi Shimon now responds to the Tanakam and says, Liolam hu ben chorin, the Eved always goes free. At Sheyomer kol nechasai nesunin leploni avdi chutz me echad me ribo sheben. Unless he says, all of my property is given to so-and-so my Eved, except for a small portion of them, that is the one case where he will not go free. And Rashi over here explains, Liolam hu ben chorin, he's always going to go free. The point of Reb Shimon is that if he said whatever he revealed, that we assume he revealed. But if he didn't, then he didn't. We don't just assume that it's talking about the Eved. Ad sheyomar, unless he says as follows: Stam chutz mi davar muat v'lo yefarish mahu mishayer. Unless he just says stam, I'm leaving out something without explaining what property he's leaving out. In other words, the Tanakama said even if the person identifies the property that's being left out, but just the very fact that he left out property, so the Eved also may have been left out. The Tanakama is talking about even in a situation where you identify the property that was left out. Rabbi Shimon responds, no, it has to be specifically a case where you don't explain what you're leaving out. The Hasam Amrinim, because there we say the Echad me ribo de kamer, that small portion that he's talking about, Hainu Eved, that might be referring to the Eved. Now, even though the Eved's really worth more than that small amount, but that's how the master considers the Eved. He considers him a very small amount of his property. So the point over here is Rabbi Shimon says only in that situation does the Eved not go free. Now the Gemara is going to learn as follows. Since Rabbi Shimon says he always goes free, so it doesn't make a difference if the Eved takes the rest of the property also. Let's say he specified and said except for this particular property, but all the rest he does get. He's going to get himself, and he's going to get all the property except for what was left off. And it would be the same thing. Let's say the Eved goes free with no nechasim. Let's say he doesn't mention the particular property. Let's say it says except for a base core of karka, and we have no idea which base core of karka. Now he won't get any karka. Because every single portion of the land we could say that was left out. The point is Rabbi Shimon would nevertheless say that he's a ben chor and he goes free. Who lav karka, because certainly the Eved is not karka. But Lo Shairei certainly didn't leave him off. Alma Palgina Dibur, and the point of all of this is that we see from Rabbi Shimon that we split up the person's language to Hakol Nechasai Ka'amarle, because what happened? He said all of my property you're going to acquire. V'lo kana elas atzmo, he didn't get all the property at all, he only got himself. And you also, you're saying that he gets himself, but he doesn't get his property. That also must be like Rabbi Shimon, that we say Palginan Dibura. And the you that Rashi is referring to over here is Rava in the previous summon, because again, Rava was talking about a case where an Eved was delivering for himself, so to speak, his own shtar shichror, and he says, B'fanei nechtam, and we said, let's say that shtar shichror says, Kol nechasai, all of my property goes to you, so Rava said, so the Eved goes free, because the B'fanei nechtam can go on the Eved's freedom, but the B'fanei nechtam cannot count as a certification in terms of the rest of the property, so the Eved goes free, but he doesn't get any property, and that's what Rav Ad Bar Masna is now saying to Rava. That seems to be going like Rabbi Shimon, that Palgin and Dibura. And so Rav Ad Bar Masna now continues, but how can you follow Rabbi Shimon? Rav Yosef Bar Menyumi Amar Rav Nachman, but Rav Yosef Bar Menyumi said that Rav Nachman said, Afa Pishakilis Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Shimon, even though Rabbi Yosef praised Rabbi Shimon, halacha Rabbi Meir, but the halacha is not like Rabbi Shimon, the halacha is like Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Kishenemru Devarim Lefnei Rabbi Yosef, when these words were said before Rabbi Yosef, Kara Olav HaMikra Hazeh, he referred to it with the following pasuk. This is a pasuk from Mishlei. The pasuk says, Fasayim Yishak Meishiv Devarim Nechochim. So it's talking about the fact that these are proper words. So he praised it, but he didn't say, he said the halacha did not follow that. But now the Gemara continues, Umi Amar Rav Nachman Hachi. But does Rav Nachman really say that the halach is not like Rabbi Shimon? As Rashi says, Umi Amar Rav Nachman Hachi de lo Palgina Dibura. Does Rav Nachman really say that the halach is that we don't say Palgina Dibura? V'Amar Rav Yosef Bar Menyumi Amar Rav Nachman. But Rav Yosef Bar Menyumi said that Rav Nachman said, Shchiv Meira Shekasav Kol Nechasav Liavdo. Let's say a Shchiv Meira, someone on his deathbed, he writes over all of his property to his Eved. V'Amar, then he gets better. Choser ben Chasim, he can retract the property he gave. V'Yeno Choser be'Eved, but he's not able to retract in terms of giving the Eved his freedom. And so the Gemara says, Choser ben Chasim matnas shchiv meirahu. Ve'eno choser b'yevet sharei yotza olav shem ben chorin. The reason why he can be choser in terms of the property is because it was a gift of someone on his deathbed. He's no longer on his deathbed, so he can retract. However, when it comes to the Eved, he's not able to retract because there already has been a name that this person, that this Eved, is a free person. The word has already gotten out that he's free, and therefore he cannot retract on that. And Rashi says, Shchiv meira choser b'chol matanosa b'babasra. There's a halach in general by Shchiv meira. He can retract any of his gifts that he gave. Sharei yotza olav shem chayris. But since the Eved was already referred to as someone who was free, so therefore v'asr l'shtabed bo. At this point, it's forbidden to make him an Eved. And so what do you see over here? Alma palgina dibura. You see even over here, we're splitting up his words. We're saying that there's a retraction on part of what he said, but not fully. And so therefore it seems on the contrary, Rav Nachman is saying that we do say palgina dibura. And so the Gemara instead answers, Elo Amar Rav Ashi. Rather, Rav Ashi says, Hasam hainu taima mishum delav kruskitu. Over there, the reason is nothing to do with palgin and dibura. The reason why we paskin like Rabbi Meir and not Rabbi Shimon is because it's not considered a full separation. And Rashi says, Hasam the Amar of Nachman halacha Rabbi Meir. Over there, where Rav Nachman says the halacha is like Rabbi Meir, meaning in the situation where the person frees the slave but leaves off some karka, and we say the Eved does not go free. Taima lav mishum delo palgin and dibura. The reason of Rabbi Meir is not because we don't say palgin and diburahu. The hakinami hizkir shem shir karka ploni, because even in a situation where he mentions the particular property that's being left off, the leka pluksa de dibura, where in that case we really don't have to split up any of his words. Even over there, Rabbi Meir says that the Eved doesn't go free, and the reason is as follows: the reason is really because it's not considered a complete separation. When a person frees a slave with a shtar shichur, it has to be a total separation. The gabe isha ksiv sefer krisos v'shichrui avodim gamri lo lo meisha, because by a wife it says the words sefer krisos. It uses the word krisos, and we learn shichrui avodim from isha, from the wife. It says lo in both places. Uva'inan bu krisos, so we need a total separation. V'keivan de ikol amemer de shayrein. So therefore, since it's possible to say that he left him off, the hanachas l'shira, because he already left off some property. V'hu lo huzkor b'soch hamatana, and the Eved is not mentioned specifically in the gift. The lo kasav le'atzmach unachasai kanuyin lach. He didn't say you're going to get yourself, and then a separate thing you're going to get the property. So lav krisos gamru. That's not called a complete cutting off from the Eved. It's not a total separation, and that's the real reason of Rabbi Meir. It has nothing to do with the fact that we don't say palgin and dibura. We paskin like Rabbi Meir for a different reason, and it could very well be that Rav Nachman would say palgin and dibura. But Rashi continues, but in a situation where nothing was left off, kihacha, like over here by the matnas shchiv meira, the issue is just an issue of retraction. So have a krisis lot says v'nishtachar sha'achas. It was a krisis in terms of going free. He's considered free for a moment. Calls man shelo chazer before there was a retraction. V'shoveno yachol achzer, and he's not able to retract by the freedom. Shekid shu Hashem, because again the word already went out that he's a free man. V'gabe mil say de Rav, and the same thing by the words of Rav by b'fanei nechtam, where it applies to half the statement and not the other half. B'Eved shevi gito, where the Eved delivers his own get. Krus gito, that's considered krus gito. It's considered a full separation. Unhidan achasim lo kana de boikim, granted that he doesn't get the property because you don't have proper certification in terms of the property, because we don't rely on b'fanai for the property. Aval atzmo kana de palgin and dibura, but he does acquire himself because we do employ the principle of palgin and dibura. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Finally, the Mishnah said, "Im yesh olav orin." If you have a situation of protesters on this get, talking about the get isha again, yiskayim bechosmav. So then, what you do is you certify the get, you certify the signatures. And the Gemara says, "Irir kama." How many people are protesting? If you're going to say that there's one person protesting on the get, but Rabbi Yochanan said, anytime you have a protest, it can't be less than two people. So what are you going to say? That there are two people protesting and they're saying that the get is no good. But then what's the certification going to help? It's going to be two witnesses against two witnesses. They should cancel themselves out, but the get should not be good. How do you know to rely on these witnesses? Maybe rely on those witnesses. You're not going to really know that it's a get kosher. So how could it be that certification is going to take care of this protest? And so the Gemara says, Ella rather irir debal. What the Mishnah is referring to is that the husband himself is protesting that it's not a good get, that it's a forged get, and in that situation, certification will be effective. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hamevi get mi Medinas Hayam. If somebody delivers a get from Medinas Hayam, from Chutz La'aretz, ve'eno yachol omer b'fanei nechtam, and he's not able to say b'fanei nechtam, im yesh olav edim yiskayim b'chosma. If there are edim on the get, so then you can certify the signatures, and the get is kosher. And the Mishnah continues, Echad Gittin Nashim v'Echad Shechrui Avadim, whether we're talking about Get Isha, divorce document, or whether we're talking about Shechrui Avadim, a document that's meant to free a slave, Shavu L'molech U'Lemevi, they're equal in terms of the halacha of delivering it to Eretz Yisrael, or delivering it from Eretz Yisrael, or delivering it to Eretz Yisrael. V'zu Achas Min Haderachim Sheshavu Gittin Nashim L'Shechrui Avadim. And this is one of the ways that Gittin Nashim are similar to Shechrui Avadim. And Rashi says, "Veinu yachol mefarish beGemara." This will be explained in the Gemara, and this was quoted earlier in the Meseches. Shavu lemolech ulemevi lomra b'fanei nechtav, meaning the halachas of molech and mevi. That refers to the halacha of saying b'fanei nechtav when the get is delivered. So the Mishnah is saying that Gittin Nashim and Shechrui Avadim are equal in that manner. And the Gemara says, "Mai eno yachol lomra." What does it mean that the shliach is not able to say b'fanei nechtav? Ilay macheresh, if you're going to say it means that he's a deaf mute. Cheresh bari suya gitahu, is a deaf mute even allowed to deliver a get? But we learned in a Mishnah, Hakol ksher l'havi as a get, everybody is kosher to deliver a get, chutz mei cheresh shota v'katan, except for a cheresh, a deaf mute, and a shota, an imbecile, and a katan, and a minor. They're not allowed to deliver a get. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Hachav ma'askin, and here what are we talking about? Kagon shenasnu lo keshupikach. He actually gave it to her and he was healthy. He wasn't a deaf mute. V'lo hispik lomer b'fanei nechtam ad shenescharish. And he didn't get a chance to say b'fanei nechtam, and then he was nescharish, he became a deaf mute, and that's why he's not able to make the statement. And Rashi says, Chutz me chereshot v'katan she'in bohem das. Chereshot v'katan, they do not have das. Vein shlichus and shlichus lagarish, and therefore their shlichus is not considered effective in order to affect a divorce. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Echad Gittin Nashim v'Echad Shechrui Avadim. Again, it says that they're similar. Gittin Nashim and Shechrui Avadim. Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught b'shlosha derachim, in three ways. Shavu Gittin Nashim l'Shechrui Avadim. Gittin Nashim are similar to Shechrui Avadim. Again, divorce documents and documents that are used to free slaves. Number one, Shavu l'molech u'lemevi. They're similar in terms of molech and mevi. Again, if you're bringing it from Eretz Yisrael or to Eretz Yisrael, in terms of the halachas of b'fanei nechtam, they're the same. V'chol get sheyesh olav eid kusi pasel, and any get, this refers to just a general document, any shtar that has a kusi signed on it is pasel. Chutz mi Gittin Nashim v'Shechrui Avadim, except for Gittin Nashim and Shechrui Avadim, and that's going to be explained later on. V'chol hashtaras, and all documents, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amud Beis.